Today, I'm joined by Greg Hawkes. Greg is a keynote speaker, advisor, and best-selling author of Act Like an Owner, known for challenging leaders to rethink how they show up at work. With over 25 years of leadership experience across real estate, nonprofits, and consulting, he brings practical, real-world insights into every conversation. Greg's Ownership Message series helps teams build trust, strengthen accountability, and expand capacity. His style is high energy, thought provoking, and practical, leaving audiences with ideas they can actually use long after the conversation ends. And I'm excited to have him on the show so we can all learn from his expertise. So, Greg, welcome to the show.
John, it is such a pleasure to be here. I know this is going to be a great 30 minutes.
Yeah, I know as well. And it's been fun talking to you even before we press record. So I know this is going to be a fun conversation. So let's dive into it. You talk about the idea of ownership, and Act Like an
Mhm.
Owner is your book. But let's get into it. First of all, you talk about the idea of owners, renters, and vandals. Now, what do these look like in the real world? And how can someone who's listening to this show like quickly recognize the mindset they're bringing to work every day?
Sure. It's built around that I own investment property. So I worked in a nonprofit org and I was working with volunteers and leaders and staff, and I own investment properties at the same time. And I just realized how kind of different people, both in my work and then with my homes, because there were some renters that actually cared more for my home than I did. They took better care of the yard. I was like, you guys come to my actual house where I live. And then there were others who just were renting, using it for the season, and just, that's what they did. They were transitioning. They were looking for a new job. They were doing, just doing stuff in between. And then there were the Vandals. I had some college boys. They destroyed one of my homes. And I was just like, oh, and I saw this parallels in the workplace. And so for me, the way I shorthand it, working with companies, for the owners are folks who bring their heart, head, and hands. They show up with imagination, with creativity. They show up thinking about how they could care more. And so they're bringing this heart, head, and hands, their skills. Whereas renters, who, when I kind of align them with Gallup's engage, disengage, and actively disengage, they're 50 some percent of the workforce, or I'd call renters or the disengaged. And people get very excited about them, but they're literally half of the American workforce. They're every other person who's working. And so they show up with their hands. They're like, I got skills. I know when the job starts, I show up, I do the job well. I'm not creating problems. And then I just go home and I'm just done. Like, that's it. I did what I need. I did what they paid me to do. Thank you very much. And I'm done. They don't care to a level that's beyond their own commitment to their job. They're not thinking or using creativity for a little bit of the whole. And then with the Vandals, they're divisive folks. They're who I call the silent saboteurs, who are kind of usually quietly resisting, or they're people who gossip and they create division. Or if somebody says, this is what we're going to do, they're going to be like, that ain't never going to happen. And so
Mm.
they just kind of create this. Sometimes it's a dampening, but it usually has a divisive element to it that causes people to refrain from going full on in. And they themselves, use their words to divide people, not unify people. So the shorthand is heart, head, and hands, and division.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I remember one time a friend of mine told me, you always heard the expression, we want, part of leadership is trying to get everybody to row in the same direction. And then
Mhm.
I had a friend who said, yeah, and make sure no one's trying to drill a hole at the bottom of the boat. And I've had that happen. I've had that
Yeah.
happen. I've had the
Yeah.
vandals. So when you speak
Yeah.
of this, I can understand. I can actually put a face to that person
Yeah.
who is,
John, most
sabotaging.
people can. When I'm out talking, they're like, we know who the Vandals are. And they're looking around and they're in a conference setting or something. Like, they know it. I'm always, because I did own investment property, I'm like, I started, when I got into this, I was like, why would anybody let Vandals remain? Like, like
Yeah.
it's just like you're saying, like, if somebody's drilling a hole in the boat, why the heck do they keep them in the boat? Throw them out of the boat. But what I found is, because in Gallup's, the actively disengaged, they're almost 20%. It's almost one in five.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why would that be? And what I found are they're usually revenue generators. So it's not like an easy, like, oh, that's a toxic personality, and that person doesn't fit on the team. They tend to be revenue generators who are like, yeah, and they're paying for half of everybody's salaries. They've got the relationship, they've got the network, they're out there hustling. And so they maybe don't fit culture. And so so I have a lot of empathy for leaders who are in a situation where it's like this person is creating a lot of issues in our culture, and they're also producing a lot of great revenue results for us. And so it's a tension that exists. So it's not just as easy as like, oh, they're not good for our culture, let's get them out. So that's one of the reasons. I found four, but I don't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so when you talk about these owners, renters, and vandals, it's not just the leader. This is the entire organization, right? And
Entire
sometimes,
organization, because it's a mindset, because
yeah,
there are people in top leadership who can be vandals. They
yeah,
can be
okay,
divisive and say, and you've experienced that in manufacturing, I'm sure, where they got their little fiefdoms or they got their own little egos, and all of a sudden, instead of being a team and thinking about the whole house, they're very narrowly focused and they're really almost competitive in an unhealthy way with other people in the
yeah.
organization.
Yeah, and I've seen that as well too. Yeah, in
Yeah.
senior leaders who are trying to protect their budget, their turf, their people, and so we
Hmm.
were fighting amongst internal battles, right? When
Yeah.
when the competition it was eating our lunch, you know.
And you know what's crazy about that, John, from the top level, and Lencioni spoke a bunch about this in the days gone by, just the effect that has on all the tiers below them. So the higher you go in leadership, if you have somebody who's a vandal or even a renter who's like what I call room focused, they're not big picture. They come into their executive meeting and they're
Yeah.
ambassadors of their room instead of we're here for the house and then we go and serve our room. They create a lot of the division. What I always say is, listen, if you got like infighting amongst teams and departments, just follow it up to a leader and you'll find a leader who thinks their room's more important than the house.
Hmm.
And when you find that, then from that person down, there's factions and fractions and just difficulty.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that you're kind of laying out here is that we have an engagement problem in America, in the world, basically, but certainly Gallup has shown that we've got an engagement problem in our organization. So, you say that leaders can unintentionally create renters or even vandal behavior. So, can you explain that a little bit and what that looks
Well,
like?
well, sure. I'll go with the renter, because it isn't the 2026 Gallup poll just came out, and it's everything is not looking rosy. But so, I'll say, and I know you've experienced this, John, where people, when they start, so my philosophy is they start out day one on the job with an owner's mindset. They want to show up and contribute. They want to show up and make a
Yeah.
difference. They show up and they're like, I want to make you know you made a good hire. Like, this was a good idea to hire me because I'm going to make a difference here. And so they'll show up to a meeting and they'll be like, I've been watching some YouTube videos. I've been listening to some podcasts. I've been reading some books about how to do manufacturing. And of course, everyone else in the room is like, oh, simmer down, buddy. Like, we're going to crush your dreams too. We're going to tell you no, no, no. And we're just trying to have a meeting, So all of a sudden, these people who show up and want to own, the culture is really like, we don't really want owners. We just want
Mm,
people to kind of fall in line and do and rent and just do what we need them to do. So they shift that, or we don't, I always say contribution is the cornerstone to commitment. If people don't get to contribute to it, you're really missing out on the level of commitment that is significant to move something forward in whatever innovative approach you're trying to, install or take or do. And so so that's one of them, stifling people's voices and not having a sense of autonomy and not having agency. And that's one of the risks. So one of the other unlocks, is like risk bold commitment from a leader. It's risky to give agency
mm,
to people in your care. It's a lot safer to be like, do what I tell you to do. Here's the oar, here's the boat. Paddle just like this. Like, we need everybody just in sync doing the thing because that's what we know gets us moving forward. And so the challenge leaders have is creating a trusting environment enough where people have the freedom to maybe explore some autonomy to take what they're learning in the front line or take what they're learning in their department and innovate and make things move more effectively and more efficiently.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know, I often talk about this is that we see young people come into the workforce and they're just so enthusiastic. They worked hard. They just got their engineering degree or their master's degree and they've worked really hard and they wanted to come to your company because of your
Yeah,
reputation. Right.
yeah,
And they're, and just like you said, they come in there with all the energy and then we give them grunt work for a long time before they allow
yeah.
them to actually bring all their talent to bear. Right. And I always thought, and you see these people go from maybe owners to use your vernacular, they go from
Mhm.
owners to renters, and you see that change over a year.
Just
That's
one
like,
year. That's all it
yeah,
takes, man.
and
They'll
and
get
they're
to their
gone.
annual review and they'll be like, dude, you started out so strong. What happened? And they're like, I started working here, man.
Right,
And
you did it.
it's like, you did this to me. I was trying to bring it. And that's why I love talking about culture. Because, when you create a space, then there's some opportunities for people to spring up in unexpected ways. And I've got a 26-year-old son, and he moved to Chicago. He's from Oklahoma, and the first place he went, he's in advertising, and it was all remote. It was 100% remote. It was an ad agency in Chicago, 100% remote. And he aspired to be around people, to be mentored, to like get in proximity of how decisions were made. So he literally, in one year, left that company, went to another company that had like a required 3 days in the workforce, had a very clear structure organizationally of where he fit, which gave him, and he's a creative and he's a strategist, is what he is. And so he has a little bit of both the account level side and the creative side. And he was there for a year and a half and had people investing in him, and he was thriving. And then his direct supervisor left, kind of thing, chaos. They didn't give him a raise. He's like, all right, I'm out of here. So he's classic Gen Z. But what I found, John, is that this generation of leaders, they have access to how other people are experiencing work like you and I never did.
Yeah,
They can watch a TikTok of a person quitting their job, right? Like they just do it. They
yeah,
can watch a TikTok or a reel of somebody getting, you know, disciplined. They'll just record and then they'll post it. So like they have a framework of how work is working for their peers that you and I never had access to. And so for the competent young people, they're like, I don't have to put up with this. There are other places that can
yeah.
value me, and or I see how other people are navigating their careers, and I can model after that in real time. And so it makes the workplace that much more competitive because they have such visible access to so many other places and so many other people, their peers, doing work the way they might like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The world has changed, and the access to information is just, yeah. There, it's yeah. They see exactly what's going on, so there's no playing games.
Yeah,
They know
and it gives
exactly
them
what's
a sense
happening.
of
Yeah,
confidence, or it's a sense of confidence, or like a direct comparison to like say, why am I tolerating this at this
yes,
workplace when I see other people living in environments and not plush and luxury? I'm not talking like ridiculousness, but just like a sense of opportunity or a sense of contribution. I mean, this generation, they want to contribute. So that idea, like you said, come in and just do grunt work for a year. You're not setting yourself or them up to benefit you in the way that both of you would like.
absolutely. So use the phrase unlocking ownership. And so,
Mhm.
what does that mean in practice? And you mentioned that there's 5 specific unlocks that we can use as leaders. So
Mhm.
what does that look like? Unlocking ownership.
Well, I find, I in the book, what's really fun about writing this book is that not just, because I've been working with businesses and doing speaking and kind of consulting work and helping create cultures, and I love that stuff. But also just in our own personal lives, John, people like are renting their own life. They are making excuses and opting out and justifying instead of like owning it all. And so, I'm walking around thinking you have the potential to be 100% responsible for everything in your life if you will take ownership of it, because people will blame. And, we live in a culture where there's a lot of, because of past or because of situation, like everybody's got a reason to have some sort of trauma in their life, and some sort of difficulty. And it's like, okay, but you know what? You can own that too and unlock the potential that you have inside of you, even if you've had all these experiences and even if you've had disappointments and frustrations and hurts. Again, before social media, you and I lived in the world and we were just like, that's life. You know what I mean? Like, well, don't we all know this is hard? Like, doesn't
Yeah.
everybody know that, like, we've all had challenges? Yeah. But in this day and age, because of it, and so what it does is it causes people to shrink back a little bit. And so part of my hope, even in with this book and a personal side, is it would compel individuals to think, where am I renting in my own life and
Mm.
how can I unlock that? So in the business side, the first one I talked about, do you want me to tell you all 5 of them? You want
Sure.
me to?
Yeah.
Okay. So because I love them, like and you please stop me on anyone and interject, and we can go in any direction with it. But the first one, risk bold commitments. I talked about leaders already. I talked about contribution, but accountability is really kind of the cornerstone of that. And I love accountability. And most people have this very uh, difficult relationship because we have a lot of pride. And at its essence, accountability says, I need help. If I say to you, John, will you hold me accountable? What I'm saying is there's an area in my life that I'm not currently performing at the level I would like, which to me is continuous growth. Like I call those people progress partners. I'm trying to make progress in an area that I can get somewhere I can't on my own. And a lot of people resist accountability because they think it's just like, I got to show up. John, here's all the places I've failed. Here's all the areas I suck. Here's where I didn't measure. So they have this really ugly perspective of accountability, but genuinely accountability gives us the opportunity to continuously grow and improve because it lets us keep being self-aware enough to say, hey, I don't want to be short with my people. As a leader, when I get tired at the end of the day, I don't want to snap at people. I don't want to respond in those ways. I'm going to invite people into my life to go, hey, hold me to this standard that I just can't seem to get on my own. And so help, nudging. That's how I think of accountability. Nudge me and remind me this is actually who I want to be, not where I just default. We all default to mediocrity. And so accountability gives us the ability to live at a level of excellence that we never can on our own. So that's a risk when you get into accountability situations. So that's one of them. The second one is activate lasting value. And in that, like how do we create more value as people anywhere on the org chart? So if you've got some young listeners who are like, I am in that first year. I don't have any decision-making authority. I'm at the lowest level. How could I create more value? And so in that, I talk about free words and the power of our words to really impact people's lives in a way that goes beyond just a bit of like a sugar hit of like, hey, you're awesome. Thanks for being here. You're the best.
Mm.
My personality's wired that way. So I think I'm an encourager because I can say these really positive things to people, but they're really just sugar hits, right? They don't have any meatiness to them. And so what I have found for that is that specificity is really what contributes to somebody creating more value. So if we were colleagues, John, and I came in and I said, John, one of the things I really appreciate about you, you just show up every day with like a really positive attitude. And when we have challenges with our clients, you always seem to have a level of respect and regard that I find admirable. And I just really appreciate that you just show up every day consistent, right? That specificity does something to you. You go, thanks for noticing, Greg. It's about time somebody noticed. I have
Yeah.
to work hard to be that way. And so it's that idea of feeling seen. And it's also speaking to something inside of somebody and they go, I like that you saw that in me. And so there's this interesting reciprocity that happens. And so this is my favorite thing about it, John, is the idea that people like people who like them.
Mm.
So I'll say that again. People like people who like them. So if I said, John, man, I just really like you, like sincerely, not manipulative, not weird, not creepy, but just like, John, I really like you. There is something that happens in you as a person that you're like, Greg, I think I like you too. And I don't even know if I want to, right? Because there's just this reciprocity. So I'll say to leaders all the time, you don't have to be a likable person. You can have a crusty personality. You just have to like the people you lead. Because if you'll do that, you'll transform your team. And it's not so much that we're trying to create people to like each other and just like, oh, we're all buddies. It's that people don't trust people they don't like.
Yeah.
And so if you can't create an environment of likability, and you've probably seen this, John, in your career, where there are leaders who speak poorly of the people they lead or who are insulting to the people they lead. And that is the problem. They're like, I work with a bunch of idiots. I don't know what these guys' problem are. I don't know how to put up with these. And it's you. It's you, leader. You're the problem because
Yeah.
you haven't found a way to like these people. And there's a lot of depth in that. That's why I wrote a book on it. But that idea of when we do that as humans, it creates this reciprocity that has a really magical effect in a workplace environment. All right, I feel like I'm talking a lot, John. You share some thoughts. What do you think on those first two, and how have you
Well,
seen
I
something like
just,
that play
I
out?
was just thinking, that we had one of my employees was working late into Friday night, working on an opportunity we have in the Philippines, and just because of the time difference, he was working late because we had a bid that was due, and I just sent him a text on a Saturday morning. It's like, I know you're working late on Saturday. I really appreciate you getting that done because you nailed it. Like everything was perfect. And
Yeah,
Monday morning, he's like, I really appreciate you sending that. It was just a simple little thing, but it's sort of
mhm,
noticing somebody, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
noticing extra effort, and it's like, I could have ignored that. I could have not said something, right? But I think when you do say something, I think it just elevates, like you said, it's like, oh, someone notices me,
yeah,
someone notices the hard work. Someone noticed the fact that I was working on a Friday night instead of, at the bar, right? And
yeah.
I think that's good. I think it's important that we catch people doing things right, and
Yeah.
I
And
yeah.
it really does. It creates a value. I'll say, and you've probably seen this, like the unfortunate situation of our soul is that negative things stick.
Yeah,
Somebody could have
yeah,
said something to you 10 years ago, ugly, and if they mattered to you, some 20 years ago, those words penetrate and they feel like they never go away. And some
yes,
people's identities are shaped by mean, ugly, hurtful words, and they just can't seem to shake them. And yet, the way our soul works is positive. Somebody could have said something to you a year ago, 6 months ago, and you have totally forgotten it. Right. And it's like, well, that's the unfortunate condition we all exist in. And so, as leaders, that specificity for me, and I'm a visual person, obviously, my whole book is a metaphor, but that thing puts like hooks in the soul. That's what I call it. It puts hooks
yeah,
in the
yeah,
soul. When you said, man, the way you showed up last night and you really went above and beyond, that really is important. Really appreciate that. What that does is he doesn't go, oh, I love when John pats me on the back. He goes, I like being that kind of person. And
mm,
so it lodges in him. And instead of him becoming that for your approval, he goes, I like being that kind of person. I like being
mm,
seen as that kind of, and we lean into it. And that's what real motivation is. I mean, people, external motivation only goes so far. It's when you see potential in someone and you speak to that, they go, you see that in me? And it
yeah.
causes them to have an image of them leaning into that is way more powerful than any
Yeah.
little attaboy. And it's
I
that
think
specificity that does that.
a very key point you put out, the intrinsic motivation is 10 times or 100 times. I don't know what the number is, but better than
Yeah.
external, than
1,000
extrinsic. So
times.
yeah, yeah. So it's
It's a
it's so
lot.
important when it's internal to you, when it's internal to that person, then you can walk away, right? Because they're fired up and they're doing things because it's important to them and not you. And I think
Right.
that's a really important point you bring up. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's that idea also of ownership is like, you get to see as leaders, like that's the greatest privilege you have is unlocking something inside of someone they didn't see themselves. And once they see themselves that way, then they become it.
Yeah.
It's that prophetic kind of like, I see this in you, I'm speaking to you, and you're like, I'm becoming. I mean, it's such a thrill as a leader
Yeah.
to be able to like have that opportunity. It's such a gift that we give young people to be able to speak into their life about that. And then they go, yep, I'm going to become that. So
Yeah.
that's the third one is the unlock is reach for responsibility. And that's kind of the one that most people think when they think ownership, they're like, you just want me to go above and beyond. It's disproportionate. As an employee, you want me to act like I own the place so that I'll sacrifice and work over and do all this. And then as the company, you guys are just like, we'll take all that. But the truth is, in the reach for responsibility, again on the leadership side, knowing what the return on investment is, why people are willing to make those sacrifices, is really important. And it's not, I call it EFROG, emotional, financial, relational, opportunity, and growth. That there are people that it fills an emotional need for them to go, I'm a go-to person. I love it when John asks me to do something because it kind of fills who I am as a person.
Mm,
And it's this emotional return that I like being the go-to guy. Other people are like, man, why are you calling me? Don't bug me. And they're like, I'm so glad you see me this way. I'm so glad I'm willing to step. And so that's a return on investment. Every single human being that goes to work is doing it because they get some sort of return. And so, as leaders, our responsibility is to go, well, it's not just the paycheck. Everybody's got to have the baseline paycheck. But then what causes people to reach beyond and go, I want to invest? Some people, it's like with young leaders, like we're talking about, opportunities. Hey, if I I want to go above and beyond so you consider me for future opportunities or relationships that so I can get around people I don't normally get around. I'm going to work late. I'm going to come in early. I'm going to take on another project just so I get networked in with people that I wouldn't normally do that. And as a leader, if you know that about people, it gives you the benefit to offer them something that causes them to go, yeah, I like that exchange. I'll work extra, and then this is a possibility to return in my life. I'll take it. And
Mm.
so understanding that, I mean, it's a really simple framework, but there are a lot of leaders who don't know what their people really value. And so they even again, this is another way you're like, how do they create a renter environment? They're just not conscious of what their people that they're leading individually consider a return on their investment. And if
Yeah.
you as a leader can get to know that, then you know who to ask for what and when and what will be. And it's not, I mean, it's great leadership is what it is. It's like I know what my people, each one of them, really value, and then I set them up to get what they want. And then in exchange, what they contribute to the company or production line or innovation that we're it's a win-win. And so it's
Yeah.
really the task of the leader to go there.
Yeah, and one of the things I often say is that you can't lead people you don't know. And I think what you're saying is that in order to be able to customize an approach that works for that individual, you have to know them. You have to know what motivates them. You have to know what frustrates them. You have to know like their strengths and their weaknesses. And so if you're locked in an office and you're never spending time with people, you don't know that, right? So part
No,
of
yeah.
part of being able to unlock that level of ownership is having getting to know your people to where what levers work with them, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I shifted also on the employee or on the worker to say, listen, you also have to think you're investing your life, not spending your life. You're not spending your life at work, you're investing your life at work. And so if you're making an investment, there's not always a guaranteed return, but the idea of what am I investing in and what kind of return am I looking for?
Yeah.
And again, to me, that's the renter owner. There are people who are renting life and they're just like spending their time. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to invest because I'm trying to create, generational wealth, not financially, but just relationally and all the good things that go with that. I'm trying to create something that has a momentum building component to it in my life, in my relationship lives, my family's life. And so, it's that I'm investing because I hope the return on it produces something that's bigger than just the exchange of work I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so that's just a mindset.
Yeah, I was just counseling one of our students, one of our college students, about their career, and I said, take jobs to gain experiences that are going to help you get to your ultimate goal that you have. And so maybe that's not the perfect job, but you're learning a skill set, you're practicing a skill set that you can later use for ultimately the thing you want to do, which is maybe start your own business or what have you. But
Yeah.
go find that opportunity to practice those skill sets you're going to need, for the ultimate goal. So you're getting something out of that investment.
Yeah. It's so good. And then the other two, I don't want to go too long. Um, Widen the circle is the next one, and this one is usually it's about silos and kind of creating strategic inclusiveness on how strategic invitations really. How do we cross pollinate, cross departments? And then the last one is think whole house, and this is really I end on this when I'm speaking because it's so essential for people to be able to consider because this is a total heart head thing, right? This isn't about
Yeah.
skills at all. It doesn't matter what your knowledge is, what your education is. It doesn't matter how long you've been somewhere. And it's a really hard one because people find a lot of their identity in their authority. So if an HR person goes to a sales leader and says, "Hey, we've been talking in the HR department about how you could increase your sales," they would just laugh and laugh and laugh and like, "Who are you? What do you know about sales? Have you ever sold anything?" Go on back, and they're on the same team.
Yeah.
And it's such a miss because could be the HR person is doing exit interviews and they're hearing things and they're talking about it and they're like, hey, listen, we've heard, and so we're going to bring it over because we care, because we are thinking about the whole of what we're doing. But there's a lot of defensiveness and a lot of identity, and so that happens. And when you think whole house, you start appreciating what each room brings to the table, and you care about the whole and not just the space you're working in.
No, that makes so much sense. And one of the things that happens oftentimes, you have a leadership team, right? Is it truly a leadership team, or is it a bunch of department heads, watching out for their own rooms in your
Yes.
terminology, right? Or do you have a team of people looking out for the house, each with a different skill set that they're bringing to
Yeah.
the table? And so when I'm building a leadership team in a business, I want to make sure that they are house thinkers and not room thinkers, right?
House thinkers. I will say, as an owner of house and buying investment properties, a room has no value except it's part of a house. Like some
Yes.
people will say things like, "This whole place would fall apart if it wasn't for us. Nobody knows what we do. You know how much we do around here, and this place. What do we and have all that kind." And I'm like, "You're just a room. You're just a
Yeah.
room. You take your room outside of the house, and you're a box in the field with no value." And
Yeah.
so I appreciate all that you're doing, but it's in context of the house that you even have value. And so when you shift that and do that, so that's, it's a challenge for people because they live in their rooms. Like we say, live in this room, bring your skills to this room. We need you to succeed in this room. And so that's the design of work. That's why it's a total heart head thing because as owners, you're like, I can care about a lot of things beyond just what I have the ability to do because I see how there's cause and effect. I see what synergy does. I see how interdependence works out. I see when one room is down, instead of cursing them and being angry at them, I'm like, how could we help? Because that room being down hurts the whole value of the house. And I care about the whole. And so instead of defensiveness and because there's a lot of people that have a lot of divisiveness between rooms and they get angry and they can't work together and you're like, oh, you're like, you're not thinking whole house here, people. And
Yeah.
it's a shift of perspective that really changes the dynamic of the whole organization when you get people acting like owners.
Yeah, I love that. I know, in the, as in the submarine force, we always used to say the enemy is outside the hull, right? Whether it was the Soviets and during the Cold War, or it was the sea pressure, right, that
Yeah.
wanted to crush you like a tin can. The enemy
Yeah.
was outside the hull, not inside the
Yeah.
hull. And so I
That's a
use
great
that,
phrase. That's a
and I
great
use
phrase.
that, in my business. I say the enemy is outside these four walls, right? Inside these four walls, we're together,
Yeah.
fighting to beat the competition, right? And
Yeah.
if we're fighting amongst ourselves, the competition wins, right?
Always.
Always. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well,
it's so frustrating when you're on the inside because you're like, I'd like us to win. Why can't we? And it's a leadership. Like it goes to leadership being able to lead effectively the people inside the ship.
yeah, absolutely. Well, this is Greg. This has been fantastic. I know we just sort of scratched the surface of this book, but
Hey, listen, they can go get one.
they can go buy their own copy. Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
what final message would you like to leave with our listeners right now?
Ooh, there's so many things. For me, especially with the folks that are listening to yours, young leaders, take ownership of every area of your life, professionally, personally, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, skills and abilities, knowledge. Own all of it and don't excuse yourself because anything of anything. And when you live life through that lens, it alters your experience with the world. And so I love that you have young leaders listening. And I think that it's applicable to work, it's applicable to relationships, it's applicable to home, but it really gives us an opportunity to have confidence, peace, and have a sustained joy, knowing I'm doing everything I can within my ability, and the things outside of it I don't have to wrestle with because I'm owning my life.
I love that. Don't be a renter, be an owner.
Yes. Yes.
I love it. Well, how can our listeners find out more about you and this important book?
Oh, just greghawks.com. Just my first name, my last name.com. The book is on there. It's a new book, but really it's on Amazon. There's an Audible version, so I love it. I read it,
Oh,
and
nice.
I got this whole like narrator's voice. Like my wife will say, don't use your keynote speaker voice with me. Like and then I'll go into this mode, and I'm like, I found a whole new voice when I read this book. I was like, okay, and here's what that. So I do a whole. So I love it. So that's my favorite version of the book. There's a Kindle, there's a hardback, there's an Audible. And so it's all on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere digitally you want to order a book online, it's there.
Fantastic. I love that. I love it when authors really spend the time and make the Audible version a little bit different, maybe, and add a little bit of
Hmm.
their own personality to it. Those are the best Audible
Yeah,
books to listen to. So, listeners, I highly recommend you follow this up. I mean, we just scratched the surface of the
we
importance of this
did,
book.
man, we did.
But there's so much in here, just not only just for leadership, but it's for life as well. And
Hmm.
we all are leaders, but we're also followers. So all of us
Yep.
have a boss, and so we want to be to our bosses, we want to be owners, and we don't want to be renters. And I think this is an important message where at whatever stage of life that you're in your
Hmm.
career, in your life, this is an important message. So, Greg, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for
Man,
sharing
John,
this.
thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been a
Yeah.
joy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I learned a lot, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.